The parental discard phenomenon, what the data actually shows. A grown child cuts off their parents, and when asked why, the answer comes back almost word for word. They mistreated me. My parent was mental. They were neglectful. It's been repeated so often, it's become accepted as truth. But the numbers tell a different story. These accusations don't appear in childhood. They don't appear in the teenage years. They surface retroactively, when the adult child is in their late 20s or 30s, and almost always after the relationship has already been severed. Before the cutoff, the relationships were reciprocal. Phone calls, holidays, shared meals, photographs that now get called into question. Then there's the language itself. Mental abuse. It sounds clinical. It sounds serious. But it has no clinical definition. It doesn't exist in the DSM-5-TR, the diagnostic manual used by every licensed mental health professional in the country. It isn't a reporting category used by Child Protective Services. In parts of U.S. law, for emotional abuse to hold legal weight, it has to be severe, repeated, and documented by an outside professional at the time it occurred, not recalled as pain decades later. Look at the numbers. In 2020, a Cornell University study by Pillemer found that roughly 1 in 4 American adults reports being estranged from a parent. That's 63.75 million people. In that same year, the total number of substantiated child abuse and neglect cases in the entire United States was 618,000. Less than 1% of children. By 2023, that rate had dropped further, to 0.74%. 63 million claims on one side, 618,000 documented cases on the other. That is not a small gap. That is a canyon. Narrow the lens to the birth years 1985 through 2004. The child population grew by 10 million between 1990 and 2010. During that same stretch, substantiated abuse rates went down, and when abuse did happen, it was concentrated in the earliest years of life. Ages 0 to 3, the rate was 15.7 per thousand in the year 2000. By ages 16 and 17, that rate had dropped to 5.8 per thousand, a 63% decline. The children who made it past age 3 without documented harm were establishing secure attachment. They were aging into lower and lower risk categories. By adolescence, they were statistically among the safest generation of young people this country had ever produced. If 1 in 4 of them had truly experienced abuse severe enough to justify cutting a parent out of their life entirely, the records would show it. Hospitals would show it. Courts would show it. Schools would show it. The records show the opposite. Something else happened to this cohort. The Census Bureau tracked it in its own administrative data. Every traditional milestone of adulthood, employment, marriage, having children, living independently, declined at the same time. Not one, all of them, simultaneously. And peer-reviewed neuroimaging studies began to document structural differences in the brain itself. Physical changes that mapped onto the exact developmental window when this cohort was spending hours a day on platforms whose own internal documents, now released in court filings, show the companies knew exactly what they were doing to young minds. So what is actually driving 63 million adults to sever ties with their parents? It isn't documented abuse. The records eliminate that. It isn't substantiated neglect. The rates were falling. It isn't a hidden epidemic of mistreatment. The population grew while the abuse rate shrank. What remains is a generation whose brain development happened during a specific, unprecedented window, and who were then handed a ready-made vocabulary to explain a decision that had already been made. A vocabulary that sounds therapeutic. A vocabulary that places blame outside the self. A vocabulary that requires no evidence, no witnesses, and no accountability. The accusations are written backward. The cutoff comes first. The reasons are assembled afterward, from a script that everyone seems to have read. This is what researcher MsPSY calls parental discard. It is not estrangement in the traditional sense. It is not the slow drift of two people who grew apart. It is a systematic pattern, visible in the data, measurable in the brain, and documented in the decline of every milestone a generation was supposed to reach. 63 million to 618,000. The math does not math. parentaldiscard.com